IMGL Masterclass Talk. Tools for responsible gambling and player protection.
Thank you for being here at such an early or relatively early morning hour. I just need to do a little small rectification to what Trudy said. Yes, there are going to be many master classes today, but I promise you that there will be only just one IMGL masterclass, and this is the real thing. This is it. The IMGL is a global network of gaming advisors, no longer just lawyers like me or some of my colleagues on the podium. It's a network of people that cater to the gaming industry. Advisors, general counsels, compliance officers, senior compliance officers, technical people like my good friend Jochen here. So it's a big network that now boasts more than 320 members all across the world, and it's heavily involved in the effort of bringing the industry together with the other stakeholders, particularly the regulators, and if possible, to the extent possible, the policymakers as well. This is a big challenge, but we are very much engaged in this exercise. It's an ongoing exercise. We have a close cooperation with the International Association of Gaming Regulators. We deliver some small conferences or seminars together, hand in hand. We believe that the way forward for this industry is actually that of having a more interactive and more cooperative relationship with the regulators and the policymakers, particularly when it comes to hot issues like the one that we are going to cover today, which is player protection and responsible gambling. I was in another conference just 2 weeks ago in Belize, in Georgia, and I had the pleasure and honor to moderate 2 different panels of regulators only from various jurisdictions, Western and Eastern Europe, and also the Eurasian part of the world. And it was amazing to see that finally we are going in the right direction, because when you have the possibility to host on the podium a bunch of regulators coming from very different parts of the world that share their experience and their comments with the audience, and that also engage with the audience, because the breaking news is that they were also taking questions from the floor, where there were operators like you and other providers, etc. This shows that there is some room for accommodation. There is some hope that we will be able together to do a better job when it comes to hot issues like responsible gambling. And so with that in mind, I would like to, before turning to my panelists here, I would like to kind of set the stage by quoting something that I actually learned while I was in Belize, where I had the possibility to have a look at a survey that had been presented there, which was conducted in multiple regulated jurisdictions in Europe, starting from Italy, Germany, the Netherlands, Spain, Portugal, and I don't remember, I'm surely missing some other regulated jurisdiction. And this was a survey conducted on player protection, on a safer way to offer gambling services. It was conducted on an anonymous way. It was focusing on affordability checks, on how the player patterns are processed and are recorded and are dealt with for purposes also of regulating responsible gambling in a better way, etc. And it was very clear to me by reading this survey that there is a situation, and I will ask my speakers to confirm or rebut this finding. There is a very disharmonized situation across regulated markets. There is no golden standard for player protection. And this is something that obviously is a big issue to be dealt with. So I would, first of all, let me just introduce the other panelists, starting from the far left hand, Jochen Biewer, who is the chief of Chevron Group, the founder of Chevron Group, which is a German-based but Europe-wide operation, advisory business, focusing on all sorts of compliance, from technical compliance to regulatory compliance, administrative compliance, and you name it. Then we have Ron Segev, my very dear friend Ron Segev from Vancouver, who is the managing partner of Segev and Segev. There is another Segev that very much looks like Ron, but there is only one Ron, and that's him. And Ron is very active all across Canada and North America, and he will bring to this discussion some important insights and comments from the other side of the big pond. Then we have another dear friend, Luis Carvalho Portela from Porto, and he is at a firm that has offices in Portugal and Macau. Last but definitely not least, another good friend, Reuben Portanier, who is at GTG firm based in Malta, but he's also a former Maltese regulator. So it will be particularly interesting to hear from Reuben, and maybe we can start from Reuben. And yes, let's start from you, Reuben. So I was making reference to this big issue, which is player protection, and how to most sensibly, I would say responsibly, regulate player protection. So the first question is, how do you see the issue, and what is your perception of how player protection is being dealt with and regulated, or maybe over-regulated, across Europe?
Good morning, Quirino. Good morning to everyone. The situation that we are in today is an obvious situation that we've been living with for the past decade, whereby you have each country regulating gaming in its own way, albeit supposedly with the same principle in mind, which is protecting players through responsible gaming measures. But somehow these measures are not completely, identical in each jurisdiction. The situation was that with the regulation at a local national level was justified on a European level, was justified to happen in front of the European Court of Justice on the basis of it is best to protect our players within our nation if it is our country that imposes player protection measures. And with that argument, based on the argument of public health, there was a waiver to Article 56 of the freedom of services of the EU, whereby the freedom to provide services was waived on this principle. So the objective there was that if you regulate at a local level, at a national level, responsible gaming becomes stronger and player protection becomes stronger. What was the situation in 2009? When there wasn't this national regime going on across the EU. The prevalence rate of problem gambling was around 1%. Let us fast forward now to 2024, 2025, after there had been all these regulatory frameworks introduced across the EU. And the rate is still around 1%. So the question here to be posed is, have all of these regulations in different ways and forms improved the concept of player protection or not? Over time, the player behaviors and technologies change. So there are now, yes, better tools and procedures and processes in order to protect players. But at the fundamental element is that the 1% remain there, which is the area that everybody wants to address and reduce.
That's a very interesting, so interesting that my mic dropped. Very interesting starting picture. Now let's move to Portugal, which is another regulated, heavily regulated jurisdiction. Would you agree with Reuben's remarks, or can you offer some different picture?
No, it's. I totally agree with what Reuben said. So, if we can speak about the specific case of Portugal back in 2014, when there was the decision to regulate the market, it didn't start well, because it started by allowing the state-owned online casino to have an advantage of staying a few months, have a license a few months ahead of the rest of the future competitors. That topped up with a very heavy tax rate for casinos, moved most of the big names out of the country. And this is something that I don't see as positive, and even going into the responsible gaming topic now, because some of these companies have standards that are even higher than the ones that our government is asking. So this was not the very first good approach for that. The argument is that we are regulating and we are getting more worried and more concerned about our players. But in the end, the truth is that we are probably regulated because we need the taxes. So whoever was writing down the laws, and this is not a regulator problem, this is a politics problem most of the times, at least in Portugal it is like that, and in many other countries too, was not concerned about that. They had another drive, which was a tax, and they don't know the market. They don't really know what is going to make a difference or not in the responsible gaming. So to answer to the question that Reuben left in the air, no, there is no 100% correct answer, but I don't think this did anything productive to make the situation better now than what it was in 2009 or even before that. I think that the data that is available, which is obviously limited, shows that. And it's time to try to do something about it, but I will leave that for the next stage of discussion.
Thank you, Luis. Before crossing the ocean, I would go to Germany now, but I would ask Jochen to then, because you also operate in other European regulated markets and also non-European regulated markets. I would like to start from Germany, because Germany has been at the forefront of some very controversial regulations concerning consumer protection, which maybe we should call over-regulations when it comes to deposit limits and self-exclusion schemes, etc. So what is your perception in this regard? Do you think that actually that is an over-regulated market, and how do you compare that to other regulated markets where you have been working and doing business?
Thank you, Quirino. In general, we can say that responsible gambling is regulated through 3 different categories. One is marketing advertising restrictions, The second one is restrictions with the product. As you can see in Germany, that there's a maximum stake of €1 per spin, which is driving all VIPs and people who are used to play with higher stakes into the black market. And the third one is a direct recognition and early detection system of responsible gambling problems in data. And we can see here that since a long time, Italy or Spain are very restrictive with marketing, even not allowing any marketing of gambling. But this is not stopping the black market to advertise on Meta, on Facebook, or in other channels. So there is no way that new competitors on the market, licensees, can reach out to players, but the black market can. So I think that the regulation through advertising and marketing restrictions is very difficult at driving the black market, advertising of the black market. Then the second way how to regulate responsible gambling is through a product, and I would think that regulators should stay out of the product question because the product is changing constantly. So some of the regulators were braver than others, like our good friend Birgitte from Denmark. She was on also the MGA. They offer a very open regulation where it's possible even to regulate new products, and it's not restricted to the products that the regulator could foresee during the regulation was established. And then the third part is the early detection systems to detect responsible gambling products based on data. And here, some of the regulators, like also Malta, they're very open. They let the operators decide which measures they want to implement. They have just some guidelines, the minimum standards which needs the operators to comply with. And other jurisdictions, they are giving exactly the triggers, the rule sets, which needs to be implemented, which I think this is not the right approach, because the rules are evolving with research and starting with a rule set which is maybe then for 6-7 years in place before a new relation comes. This is not an appropriate way to establish early detection systems.
Thank you, Jochen. And now let's cross the ocean. And I would like to ask you, Ron, if what you have heard so far resonates to you, or if you have a different perception from your observation point across the pond.
Well, I think I bring a unique perspective, particularly informed by the way the province of Ontario does things. And the reason it's unique is because the province of Ontario is actually a commercial partner to all the operators in the market. So when you enter the market as a B2C operator, you actually enter into a commercial agreement with the province of Ontario. And so what that means is that the government is a commercial stakeholder in this discussion. I think a very interesting question to ask ourselves on a panel like this is, what's the difference between RG and PG, right? Responsible gambling and problem gambling. And what I like about Ontario's approach is that, of course, they're concerned about problem gambling, which is a mental health issue, but they're also uniquely concerned about responsible gambling. And that's about protecting the broader public interest and also about protecting the sustainability of the industry. If you don't look after RG, you're going to have an unsustainable business. If you have operators who see irresponsible gamblers or problem gamblers as VIPs, that's a big problem. Okay? Now, one of the things that I like about what Ontario is doing is that they're a very activist jurisdiction, and just recently, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, they'd come out and find a very high-profile brand in the Ontario market for not freezing an account. We had a situation where someone had deposited $2.5 million and subsequently went on to lose $400,000 in a matter of weeks. and they find the operator. But critically, what they did was they posted the reasons for their findings publicly on their website for the industry to see. And I think that level of transparency does instill sort of a minimum base standard of expectations, and also does instill some confidence in the market that they are doing something. And I think the activism is really critical, not just in terms of compliance enforcement, but also in terms of cracking down on the black market. Because exactly as Jochen had said, my colleague here, the black market is alive and well. If we're really concerned about RG, PG issues, we need to be concerned about the black market because that's where it's happening, right? It's the Wild West out there, and they need to be held to account, and the only way we can do that is through enforcement.
Okay, you're touching a very sensitive point when you introduce the concept of the black market and how it is prospering against the backdrop of an over-regulated macro market that we have in Europe and outside of Europe. And in fact, let's use the advertising restrictions as a benchmark, okay? They have been dealt with in a very disharmonized way across Europe. We go from the blanket gambling advertising ban that we have in place here in Italy to more flexible, more reasonable, sustainable regulations in other markets like, for instance, the UK, and everything in between. Now, this is part of the problem, because if you do not deal in a reasonably standard, harmonized way across the markets, what happens is that ultimately you are pushing more players in the wrong direction, particularly if you over-regulate. Now, the fact that there are no official figures that you can use in terms of comparing the increase of regulation, advertising and marketing regulations to the increase of players going to offshore websites to play, does not mean that we do not know. Actually, we know very well that there is a direct relationship. So, going back to a former regulator and current advisor, what can we do to reverse this, perverse mechanism where if you just keep introducing new regulations, not harmonized at all, very often not supported by objective and independent data that tell you what is the problem that you have to tackle, and therefore probably you are using, the wrong weapon to tackle it. What can we do as an industry to reverse this kind of very dangerous trend, regulatory trend?
Yeah, it's a very loaded question, Quirino. I don't see it as a one solution which would solve everything. There are two main drives, I believe. The first being the political class, whereby the politicians are the ones who are the lawmakers. It's not the regulators. The regulators are just there to implement what has been decided by a parliament. So it's the politicians who are actually driving what the regulations should be. Now, if the politicians are basing their decisions on emotion and not on data, or on vote catching, or loss of vote mitigation measures, because it all boils down to votes when it comes to politicians, rather than data, then you start getting these haphazard implementations which are intended to be for player protection, but in reality they're having the opposite effect, such as advertising bans. The other path which I was thinking of is the role of the operators as well in all of this, because the operators are the ones that actually can ignite or put out the fire when it comes to emotional decisions being taken by politicians. So let us take the example of advertising, whereby the operators had a very key role in igniting the fact of having an advertising ban in Sweden. When the Swedish market started to get regulated, the Swedish licensees started bombarding the TV media with adverts of their products from morning till evening. It was an overkill, and therefore it ignited the politicians to say, oh, hold on a second, we cannot have so much advertising about gambling, so we're going to ban it. So they're putting in reason from the operator's point of view is an important element. Coming to your aspect of just to touch upon advertising bans, one of the issues which I believe as a past regulator is affecting as well the black market is the fact that when you ban advertising, you are negating your players in your jurisdictions information of who's licensed and who's not. So if, as a player, I do not know who's really licensed because it is not official, I might go onto the black market without even knowing. So advertising in this case should be seen as a way of how to promote who is actually regulated. And I'll just leave it to that.
Yeah, and Luis, is the Portuguese regulator doing anything on this note that Reuben just mentioned? Are they supporting the good guys versus the bad guys in any way, shape, or form?
I mean, getting back to what we spoke in the beginning, let's not mix the regulator and the lawmaker. But speaking about the regulator specifically, they do have a public list of whoever is regulated. I honestly don't think it's enough, because if I intend to place a bet, the first thing I do is not going to the regulator page to check who is. So that's it's only possible, as Reuben said, if we create an environment where you can actually advertise who is legally licensed or not. What I also agree, a point that I also agree with Reuben too, that in Portugal, I insist in this, and it hasn't happened yet, is that all the regulated operators get together and they come forward by their own initiative with a proposal to the regulator saying, look, we want to publicly advertise that all of us are regulated here. Let's do some initiatives in order to push this forward as a concentrated effort. This would not solve the problem, because there is no magical solution, and my take is you will never win the war against the black market, but you can win some battles. So if it is publicly available and repetitively said that these are the regulated operators, I believe there will be this will be a way of reducing the tendency for a player to go to an offshore. Because what I see in Portugal, if I speak with someone in the street, is they don't know who is regulated or who is not regulated. Also because there are advertising restrictions, but it's always possible to navigate those waters and end up placing adverts either offline or online that will drive people there. You cannot control it. It's almost impossible to stop it. On the other end, I do understand that the regulator is limited by wherever the law says. And in Portugal, for example, we have the same law since 2015 for the online. And things have changed quite a lot since 2015, as you all know. And this leads to another point, which is, in Portugal at least, we don't have the lobby as a regulated activity. But I do believe that it will be necessary to have the stakeholders, and I mean all the stakeholders in the industry, not only the operators, but also the advertisers, the providers, etc., to try to approach the governments and make them see that blanket bans or limits on how much you can wager will not solve the problem, and it will make them lose money actually out of taxes. Because if they are not concerned about the player protection, which in some cases I think they are not, if you put them the carrot that you will make more taxes, this might be a way of creating some interests on their side. But I don't know if this is the ideal solution. It's a possible one, I foresee.
Okay, now going back again to Germany, can you tell us whether in Germany there is a direct relationship between the regulations, again, I keep calling them over-regulations, the over-regulations and the push towards the illegal market? Is there a direct relationship, and is that something that your policymakers and your regulator realize and care about, or they just don't get the big elephant in the room?
I would say that in general, if the regulation is very strict, then it's the responsibility of the regulators to enforce the regulation. And we just heard that in Portugal and in Malta, in other jurisdictions, the regulation is not properly enforced. So it's still possible for the black market to advertise through advertising channels which are out of control of the regulators. And sometimes the regulators just don't have the knowledge to fight the black market back. There was in Germany an official statement that they are not going after crypto casinos because they don't know how. And that's something which should not happen. There should be knowledge and also a certain will to fight back the black market and to enforce the regulation. And my second opinion about it is, it sounds a bit contradictory, but more enforcement would help the regulation to work. And on the other hand, there should be more self-regulation when it comes to the measures to be implemented for responsible gambling, like to develop new tools, new AI tools maybe, which are using more data points, not just transaction data, but maybe also CRM data. And we are very close to see this is happening, that a lot of more data will be used to fight responsible gambling problems. And when it comes to the product, I think that the policymakers should keep their hands out of the products, because this is at the end, when there are new products and they're not regulated, there will still be a demand on the market, and then the black market will see this demand and deliver the products. So also it sounds contradictory. My opinion is more enforcement and more knowledge at the regulator about the enforcement, and then open up the regulation. This is more a claim to the policymakers that the market can decide about the need of the players and about new developments when it comes to technology, what kind of products they need to have on the market, and how they can fight problems like not just RG but also like money laundering.
And Ron, in addition to the over-regulations issue, do you see also a regulatory gap, for instance, when it comes to crypto casinos? The fact that they are not regulated in most countries, is that also an additional reason or driver for consumers to go and seek cryptocurrency gambling services offshore?
Yeah, I want to focus on the term regulatory gap before I go to crypto casinos, because we don't have to go offshore to find an egregious regulatory gap in the United States with the development of predictions markets. Okay? So predictions markets it's de facto legal sports betting in all 50 states, right? It's a gambling license by litigation. So notably Kalshi is winning at the appeals level on a state-by-state basis, they're not governed by a gambling regulator. They're governed by the Commodities Futures Trading Commission. The CFTC has no RG standards, right? So you want to talk about a regulatory gap that's egregious right under our nose. That's it. So what is the answer to that? I wish I knew. Okay, let's talk about crypto. I'm in a raging agreement with my colleagues here, and I find it so interesting that the Canadian experience mimics the Portuguese and the German and the Maltese experience. Two things. One, I think the regulator needs to understand that they don't actually have a monopoly, that the player has options outside of the regulated space. And as a result, the regulator needs to understand that their market needs to compete with the offshore market. And so how do you do that? Do you do that by creating barriers to entry into the regulated market, or increased compliance costs, or untenable rev share or, on GGR or gaming tax, which puts pressure on pricing and odds and promos and VIP management? Seems like, no, that's not how you do that, because that allows the offshore market to compete more effectively, drives players out there, certainly VIP players. And then secondly, while they don't have a true monopoly, I think it's very important that the regulator understands that they do have some power. So in Ontario, for example, the regulator likes to say that they don't use a prescriptive approach, they use a descriptive approach. And so what that means is they like to describe the outcome of what the regulations intend to achieve, but they won't tell you exactly how to do that. I think there's a fine balance between the two approaches. So what I mean specifically is, if the regulator requires all operators in market to use technology, such as some behavioral analytics technology, to make sure that there's no problem gambling, that players aren't chasing losses, for example, well, why don't they do that? They have the power to do that. If the regulator requires, and for me this is sort of a pet cause for me in Ontario, requires affiliates in the Ontario market to not advertise promotions on the affiliate site, such that only promotions are allowed to be advertised on the operator site, I think that's a huge blind spot, because a player is searching for bonuses and a player is searching for promos. And so when they do that Google search, or where they use that ChatGPT search, the search result is going to be offshore necessarily. And why is that? It's because the gray market affiliates are going to show up. So I think that when you look at that, it is a symptom of the regulated market thinking that we're a true monopoly, we don't have competition, we don't have to understand the broader market. And going back to crypto, if I can bookend it for you, we don't need to understand how the market is developing from a player perspective and from a product perspective. There's a great New York Times article that came out where the headline was, "Gambling and investments are the same thing." So we see the likes of Robinhood now entering the market, Kalshi, governed by the CFTC, entering the market. Young people who grew up buying crypto, buying tokens, NFTs, meme coins, which are all gambles, see those spends as investments. So how are they going to look at crypto casinos, right? Sports betting, do they see it as a savvy investment? Do they think they have the edge? They might. There's a demographic shift, and I think regulators need to understand that and need to realize that, you know, a straight ban isn't going to win. Maybe we need to adapt our regulated market to allow for some of these new behaviors in a regulated, more responsible way. And so it's the evolution of the market that I think the regulators need to keep an eye out for.
Interesting stuff. Now, I see we only have a bunch of seconds left, so in terms of final, very quick comment, I would like each of you to share. Pragmatically speaking, how can we being an important, essential component of the industry, the gaming industry, how can we help policymakers and regulators do a better job by engaging with them in an open, transparent dialogue as we are trying to do by the IMGL, by providing other surveys, no matter if they are commissioned by one or more operators, as long as they are objective, reliable, professional, etc. This could be a useful tool for policymakers to get to know a bit better how to deal with a specific issue and so relevant as player protection. Or do you have any additional suggestions or recipes to make sure that going forward we can have a more sustainable and responsible regulation when it comes to responsible gambling? Reuben.
Well, I think dialogue is an important element whereby there should be engagement between the operators, the industry as such, which today, let's be frank, is not very united. So there needs to be a united voice by the operators, like similar to what happens in the alcohol industry, and engage with the political class. And the other element is data, whereby politicians, who are the lawmakers, need to have data, proper data, in order to allow them to come up with the right decision and not take an emotional decision based on an article that might show up on the front page of their local newspaper.
You support that, Reuben?
Yeah, it's coming up with the data and bring them the solutions, because most of the times they don't have time to think about the solutions. So present them with the data, with the solutions, make them believe that they were the ones having the solution in their head or something like that. This will probably be the way to move forward.
Jochen?
I can only repeat what my colleague said, that the IMGL started to train regulators on specific topics, and this is part of the dialogue. So training regulators, and I totally agree, it's important to give anonymized data to the regulators so that they can do research not on data which was produced through AI, but on real market data.
And Ron, give us a final word.
Yeah, I have an easy solution. Come to a show like this, right? Come and learn about the market. Go and visit a stand that specializes in AI-powered behavior analytics or RG mitigation tools. Or go see who's a crypto casino. And don't have a judgmental conversation with them. Have a conversation where you understand their market, what their players want, why they're so popular. See if that will work for you. I would love to see them walk the floor of a show like this as a commercial partner, a stakeholder in the global industry, because that's what they are. And this is such an easy way for them to raise their game.
Thank you. And on this note, I would like to place a safe bet that come 1 year, when we will reconvene on this podium, we will definitely count more regulators in the room than today. It's a safe bet. There is no regulator. Okay, thank you very much.